I am going to tell you something today that will make half of you hate me and the other half call your bank before this video ends. And I don't care which half you fall into, because by the time I'm done, you will know the one secret that every elderly person who dies broke and broken wishes someone had screamed at them 40 years ago. I'll get to that secret, but you're not ready for it yet. First, you need to understand how deep the knife is buried in your back, because right now, you're smiling at the people holding the handle. Yesterday, at exactly 2:30 in the afternoon, my 26-year-old grandson walked into my living room wearing a pair of sneakers that cost $500. I know the price because I paid for them. They were his birthday gift. He sat on my couch, the one with the stained upholstery I've been meaning to replace for 3 years, but haven't, because every time I open my savings app, I hear my own mother's voice telling me to leave something behind. He sat on that sad, tired couch and asked me to fund his 3rd gap year in Europe. 3rd, not the first one, where I told myself he was finding himself. Not the second one, where I told myself maybe he needed more time. The 3rd one. And I looked at those sneakers, the ones I bought, on the feet of a grown man who has never once asked me if my knees hurt when I climb the stairs. And I felt something snap inside me that I should have let snap 20 years ago. I said no. And then I sat in silence while he looked at me like I had betrayed him, like I had taken something that belonged to him. And that look, that entitled, wounded, confused look on his face, told me everything I needed to know about the lie I had been living. Because that boy did not look at me and see a woman. He looked at me and saw a vault with a heartbeat, a vault that was supposed to stay locked and full until the day it stopped breathing, and then the vault would open, and everything inside would pour out for him and his mother to divide up like spoils of war. That is what I had become, not a matriarch, a holding account. Let me tell you how the system builds that cage, because it didn't happen by accident. When I was 32 years old, I walked into a bank in this country with cash in my hand. Cash I had earned cleaning houses and doing bookkeeping on the side. And the loan officer looked at my skin and told me my credit profile was unconventional. That's the word he used, unconventional. What he meant was that a black woman with no husband and no co-signer was not the kind of investment his institution wanted to make. I fought for that loan. I fought for every single dollar that came after it. I built what I built by crawling through a system that was designed to keep me renting, keep me borrowing, keep me dependent. And after 50 years of fighting the system, after clawing my way to a place where I could finally sit down and breathe, I handed the keys to my fortress to the very people who never had to fight for anything because I had already fought for them. And they took those keys and started redecorating while I sat in the corner, rationing my own vitamins. The night after I refused Leo's request, I couldn't sleep, so I did what every woman my age does when she can't sleep. I picked up my phone and scrolled, and there it was, my daughter Clara, 55 years old, a corporate executive who earns more in a quarter than I earned in my first decade of work, posted photographs of herself at a restaurant where the appetizers cost more than my weekly grocery budget. She was glowing, champagne in hand, caption about treating herself because she deserved it. And she does deserve it. I'm not arguing that. But here is what burned a hole through my chest. 3 days earlier, Clara had called me to remind me not to touch the savings account because the market is uncertain and she might need the cushion for a down payment on a new apartment. She told me to wait. She told me to be patient. She told me the family needed that money to stay accessible. And then she went to dinner and spent her own bonus on lobster and wine, knowing full well that her mother's safety net was still stretched tight beneath her, ready to catch her if she stumbled. She didn't need my money. She needed to know my money was there. My poverty was her peace of mind. But before I tell you what I did about it, you need to understand the lie they've been feeding you, because it's the same lie they fed me, and it almost killed me quietly. A week before all of this, I went to see my doctor. Routine visit. He told me about a new protocol, stem cell therapy combined with precision supplementation, designed to improve bone density and joint mobility. $15,000. My first thought was not about the pain in my knees that wakes me up at 3 in the morning. My first thought was not about the fact that I haven't walked to the park without a cane in 2 years. My first thought was, I can't spend that. That money belongs to Clara's apartment fund. I chose my daughter's hypothetical real estate over my ability to walk without pain. I chose biological poverty so that a woman who earns 6 figures could have a slightly smaller mortgage. And I almost walked out of that office, back to my stained couch, back to my rationed supplements, back to my cage, and called it love. That is the sickness. That is the disease that no doctor can name because the culture itself is the pathogen. We have been told for generations, especially those of us who built something from nothing, especially those of us whose skin meant we started the race with chains on our ankles, that the purpose of wealth is to pass it down, that the noble act is to sacrifice, that the measure of a good mother is the size of the inheritance she leaves behind. And nobody, not one person, ever stopped to ask, what happens to the woman while she's busy dying to leave a full account? I'll tell you what happens. She stops buying her supplements. She stops replacing her furniture. She stops traveling. She stops living. She becomes a breathing savings account, and her family starts treating her like one. They check her balance more often than they check her blood pressure. They call to ask about the portfolio before they ask about the pain. And when she finally has the nerve to spend $1 on herself, they whisper to each other that she's losing her mind, that she's being irresponsible, that she's being selfish. Selfish. The woman who built the entire floor they're standing on is called selfish for buying herself a decent pair of shoes. Here is what the system doesn't want you to know. The financial industry, the estate planning industry, the entire apparatus of generational wealth transfer is not designed to honor you. It is designed to keep your money still. Still money is manageable money. Still money generates fees. Still money sits in accounts that banks can leverage. Still money creates predictable estate flows that attorneys can bill against. When your financial advisor tells you to preserve the legacy, he is not looking at you and seeing a woman who survived redlining, job discrimination, and cultural erasure to build a fortune. He is looking at you and seeing a fund. Mr. Henderson, my advisor for 15 years, sat across from me and told me to minimize my distributions to protect the estate from tax erosion. He never once asked me what I wanted to do with my remaining years. He never once said, "Ruth, you've earned this. Spend it on the best medical care money can buy." He said, "Think of the children." And I did. I thought of them for 50 years. And what did they think of me? They thought of my balance. If you are sitting there right now, nodding, if you have ever skipped a doctor's appointment to keep a savings account untouched for someone who just bought themselves something expensive without thinking twice, then stop everything and type strength in the comments, because you and I are about to rewrite the contract. 3 days after the restaurant photographs, 3 days after I said no to Leo, I called a family meeting. Clara came in first, already tense, already armed with her speech about fiscal responsibility and long-term family planning. Leo came in wearing those sneakers. Henderson came in with his briefcase. They all expected me to present a revised estate plan, maybe a new trust structure, maybe a compromise. I did not compromise. I sat at the head of my own table, in my own house, the house I paid for with money I earned by surviving a system built to crush me, and I told them what was going to happen. I did not ask. I told. Every dollar I own, every asset, every account was being moved into an annuity trust designed to exhaust itself over 15 years. Not 20, not 30, 15. The trust would fund my stem cell therapy, my precision supplements, a private driver, so I never have to depend on anyone to take me to a doctor's appointment again, a security system so I can sleep without wondering who has a key, and annual research trips so my mind stays sharper than the people trying to manage me. At the end of 15 years, the trust would be empty, zero, nothing left, no inheritance, no cushion, no safety net made from my bones. Clara's face went white. She said, "Mama, you can't do this. What about the family?" And I said something I should have said 30 years ago. I am the family. I am the one who built it, and I am done being the foundation that everyone stands on while it cracks. Leo asked who would help him get started after he figures out what he wants to do. I told him he has 2 hands, a brain that I paid to educate, and the same system I had to fight, except his version of that system, while still brutal, is not the version that told me my skin color meant I was worth less than the paper my loan application was printed on. If I could build a fortress starting from the mud, he could certainly build a room starting from the floor I already gave him. Henderson told me I was making an emotionally driven decision. I fired him on the spot. I fired him because a man who calls a woman's decision to invest in her own survival emotional is a man who has never had to choose between his own health and someone else's comfort. I fired him because for 15 years he treated me like a spreadsheet with a pulse, and I was done being calculated. Now let me tell you about what happened to my body, because this is where the science meets the soul, and most of you are going to miss it if you're not paying attention. Within 2 weeks of making that decision, before the first treatment even started, my blood pressure dropped. Not because of medication, because the weight of being everyone's emergency fund was lifted off my shoulders for the first time in decades. The chronic anxiety of watching a number in an account and feeling like it owned me, like I was its guardian instead of its owner. That anxiety had been flooding my body with stress hormones for years. Cortisol, adrenaline, the kind of chemical warfare that your own body wages against you when you live in a state of perpetual sacrifice. When I stopped sacrificing, my body stopped fighting itself. After the first round of therapy, I could walk to my mailbox without the cane. After the second, I went to the grocery store alone for the first time in 8 months. I'm not telling you this to sell you on stem cells. I'm telling you this because the money I almost saved for Clara's apartment is now circulating in my bloodstream, rebuilding my joints, strengthening my bones, and keeping my brain sharp enough to sit here and tell you this story without forgetting a single name or date. That money is not gone. It is invested in the only asset that matters at my age, me, living, moving, thinking, deciding. But before I give you the master secret I promised at the beginning, let me address what some of you are thinking, because I can feel the judgment through the screen. Some of you think I'm cold. Some of you think I abandoned my family. Some of you are wondering what kind of mother chooses herself over her children. And I need you to hear this with your whole chest, because this is the part where everything either clicks or you stay trapped forever. I did not abandon my family. I abandoned the role they assigned me. There is a difference between being a mother and being a martyr. And the system, the culture, the guilt, the obligation, all of it works together to blur that line until you can't see where the woman ends and the sacrifice begins. I drew the line. I drew it in permanent ink, and I am not sorry. Clara hasn't spoken to me much since the meeting. She'll come around or she won't. Either way, I will be walking without a cane. Leo got a job at a restaurant 3 weeks after I cut the funding. He hates it. Good. Hating a job is the first step to building something you love. And he was never going to take that step while standing on my wallet. And Henderson was replaced by a woman who looked at my medical file before she looked at my portfolio and said, "We need to prioritize your quality of life, because none of this money matters if you're not here to use it." First advisor in 15 years who saw me as a person. Here is your master secret, the one I told you I'd give you at the end. The greatest inheritance you can leave your family is not money. It is not a house. It is not a trust fund. The greatest inheritance is the memory of a woman who refused to be consumed. Because money gets spent, houses get sold, trust funds get divided and argued over and taxed into fractions. But the image of a mother, a grandmother, a black woman who looked at the system, looked at her family, looked at the financial advisors and the guilt and the culture of martyrdom, and said, "No, I choose myself." That image burns into the generational memory like a brand. It teaches the daughters that self-sacrifice is not love. It teaches the grandsons that no one owes them a soft landing. It teaches everyone watching that survival is not just about building the fortress. It is about living in it, lighting every room, using the fine china, sleeping in the master bedroom instead of the servants' quarters of your own life. I am 80 years old. My trust is draining, exactly as planned. My knees work better than they have in a decade. My mind is a weapon I sharpen every single day. And for the first time in 50 years, when I look at my bank account, I do not see a number that belongs to someone else. I see fuel, my fuel, for my life, for however many years I have left, and I plan to use every single one of them on my own terms, in my own house, in a new chair with new upholstery, reading books I bought with money that nobody else will ever touch. So I will ask you this one time, and I want you to answer honestly, because lying to me is useless and lying to yourself is fatal. What was the last thing you refused to buy for yourself so that someone else, someone who is perfectly capable of earning their own way, could feel secure knowing your money was sitting there waiting for them? Name it. Type it in the comments. And then ask yourself whether you are living in your fortress or whether you have already handed the keys to someone who never had to build one. If you are ready to take the keys back, start today, not tomorrow, not after you talk to your children about it, today, because at 80, I can tell you with absolute certainty that tomorrow is a luxury the universe has never once promised to any of us. And the only thing worse than dying is dying knowing you spent your whole life funding someone else's comfort while you sat in a broken chair, in pain, waiting for permission to live. I didn't wait for permission, and neither should you.